Will Celebrimbor succeed in crafting these 9 rings?
Is there a rift brewing between Galadriel and Elrond?
Is Adar going to face off once again with Sauron?
And who the heck is this mystery maybe wizard wandering around the desert?
Red and Red Real Reviews journeys across Middle-earth for Season 2 of The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power on Amazon Prime.
Ahoy, ladies! I didn't see you there. Would you guys like to set sail on this ocean of flavor?
Randall, look at eye contact, please. You're gonna be cool, right?
Oh, baby, I'm as cool as the other side of the pillow.
Been staring at this board for days.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die.
Act. Bears eat beets.
My brain is on fire. I'm dying.
I am the one who knocks.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
When they say 2% milk, I don't know what the other 98% is.
It's hard to believe we're even the same species.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
Oh my god. The microchip has been compromised.
Dracarys.
And welcome back to episode 3 of Red and Red Real Reviews. Hey. So this is an interesting one because I watched the first season of Rings of Power. I believe it was 2 years ago. And I watched it with my husband. We both kind of felt like it didn't really grab us. You know, I would just kind of go through the motions watching the episodes. Like I never was like, oh, I can't wait until next week when the next episode airs. You know, I never was looking forward to it. I was just kind of like, let's get this over with. Let's just see it through and finish it. And
yeah, I think when we were storyboarding the season, I think you couldn't remember at one point whether you had watched it or not.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even remember what happened like in the finale of the first season. I really rely on those recaps when especially if it's been a couple years. So I mean, I already kind of had my opinion established of it. And when you were like, oh, like we should cover it, you know, people are talking about this, I was kind of like, I was like, I didn't love it, but I'm like, you know what, I'll give it an honest chance. Like there was, you know, a lot of hubbub about it being such an expensive show. And I was like, does it live up to the hype? It didn't seem like it did in the first season. So, but I was willing to give it another chance. I mean, my husband is more of a Lord of the Rings fan. He like rewatches the movies every 6 months or a year just out of boredom. And
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen all the movies. When I was in middle school, I read The Hobbit. I've seen every single movie, but I'm not really super into the lore, like the story about it as most people are, but I generally know about it. So I was just kind of willing to give it another chance.
Yeah, I found two things to be true. One, it's been a very long time since I've seen the film. So I'm glad that this was a prequel series, which is funny. That wasn't necessarily obvious to me watching season 1. But I'm glad it was a prequel series because I was a little worried that it was going to be more of a continuation show, and I wasn't going to remember the films enough, and I was like, oh no, like I don't know where this left off. So I was very glad that it was a prequel series, and I'm also glad, like I also kind of went into with trying to be optimistic because season 1 was just a lot of detail. It was a very detail intensive show, and they were almost kind of like building all the characters at the same time. So it was very, very intensive and kind of hard to follow, like the kind of map, so to speak, of the character arc. So I was much more glad that the season 2 was a little more refined as far as the plot.
Yeah. So coming up later, we'll talk about a real comparison of season 1 and season 2 and how we thought they stacked up with each other. But I mean, it's not really any sort of secret that the show has really had a lot of criticism from the beginning. So I know you had to catch up and watch season 1, so pretty quickly before you also watched season 2. So did you hear anything? Did you read anything about the show before you began season 1? Did you see anything about season 2 before you started it, and if you did see anything, do you think the criticism was warranted?
I I don't know whether I do this actively or subconsciously, but I try to avoid uh critiques of things as I'm watching them. I don't like,
Mm,
yeah, like I don't know if I just subconsciously do it because I figure like you know we have the show and I have additional shows and I'm we're both doing in the creator space, so it's kind of like I don't want what I do to be influenced by what other people are doing. So even like going back throughout my life, I kind of try to avoid what other people think of things because I don't want my opinion and my actions to be to kind of be influenced by what other people's negativity. Because there's some people like I mean, it's season one we did quite a few episodes on remakes.
mm,
So I don't want to even whether I've seen the original or not, like
right.
I don't want to have someone's negative opinion just because they can't accept the remake influence my consumption of the media and think like, oh well, I know it's going to be bad, so I'm not going to expect it to be good.
Yeah, and with a prequel show like this, or like we watched House of Dragon, which was
Mhm.
a Game of Thrones prequel. It's yeah, it's hard. You don't want these negative reviews to like poison your mind about what you would otherwise think.
Yeah.
So I get it. I mean, I don't actively try to I don't mute words in my social feeds or anything like that. Like I really try to avoid spoilers. Sometimes they
Hmm.
sneak up and stuff, but I think for me that's kind of what it was for season 2. I actually asked my husband, I said, do you want to watch this with me? I have to cover this for the podcast, or are you going to watch it on your own? And he's like, no, I'm not interested. You can watch it. And I was like, so you're just not going to watch it?
Yeah,
No.
you're the fanboy.
So I was like, why? Because I mean, he wasn't like super gung ho into it the first season, but he was like, oh, I think it's pretty good. And I was kind of like, oh, I don't think it's worth the hype, the $1 billion hype and all that.
Mhm.
And so I was kind of surprised that he said that. And he kind of volunteered the information. He's like, I saw some video or I read somewhere that in this second season, the orcs had families. He's like, there was some situation I read about with like a baby or a kid orc, and there's like parents. And he's like, I just thought that was totally wrong as far as like how that universe goes. He's like, orcs don't have families. He just thought it was so stupid. And that was what ruined it for him. So he was like, nah, I don't have any interest in the second season.
Do you recall seeing that, by the way, in season
Yes.
two? Okay, because I remember us talking off air about that before I started working on season two, and I didn't catch that, so I thought maybe the reference was that was a reference to Adar's relationship with the orcs, where they call him like I don't know, King Father or Lord Father, whatever it was. But like I didn't necessarily see that as a familial thing. I just thought that that was kind of his title. Like in Game of Thrones they call um is it Lady Olenna, they call it the Queen Mother, the high of High Garden she is. So like I just thought it was like a title of sorts of that.
No, I did note it down. I want to say it was in the beginning. It was within the first 3 episodes, I want to say. It
Hmm.
was a very brief moment. It basically was a what we assume is a female orc
Yeah.
holding, it wasn't like a baby orc, it was just a small orc. And I think the orc is like crying or screaming or something. And I
Oh,
think the
okay.
mom is just kind of holding it. The father orc is standing right there. And
Yeah.
the mother orc might say something like, about like the unrest or the chaos, or I don't remember what it was. It was a very brief moment, but it was kind of out of place. And,
Yeah.
uh, we'll
Humanize.
talk, we'll talk more
Humanize the
about.
marginalized characters of Middle Earth.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about the things that kind of made us like scratch our heads or be like, okay, that was lame. But
Yeah, The only thing I will say is coming off of season one, it had kind of a old school Dungeons and Dragons feel where like when you're building your character and you're writing them all down on graph paper. And like I remember observing friends doing that like in a little I don't want to say crop circle, but like in a little circle they got all their like, 4-inch size textbooks of Dungeons and Dragons statistics and they're writing all their characteristics down of their characters on graph paper. And I'm just like I'm a visual person, so I'm like not seeing a picture of the characters they're so fond of and invested in, and I'm like, what are you doing? This is driving me insane. So season one had like a feeling of that to me with all the granular data. So that was the only kind of, I guess, negative preconception I had.
Yeah, and what did I think for me too, kind of carrying over from the first season, the only kind of negative, there was kind of a bad taste left in my mouth from the first season of diversity for diversity's sake. And
Sure.
I remember my husband, making a bunch of comments about, why is there all this diversity? Like that wouldn't be the case, like for the elves or for the dwarves, or just kind of questioning, like, why is that included in there? Like, why did they just include diversity for diversity's sake? So just kind of carrying over from the first season, like there was a little bit of that, like, okay, why are we playing this game?
Like it doesn't fit the scene set.
Yeah. So I did have a little bit residual of that energy, but getting into the characters. So we've covered a lot of shows that I would consider to be sort of complicated just from a standpoint of having so many characters. I mean, Wheel of Time, the House of Dragon. I feel like there's definitely more. And for me, I had to take notes of what was happening in every scene, what was happening with the characters. I had to I had to refer back to my prior notes to be like, okay, what's the name of this person again? It's just there's a massive amount of characters and they're constantly going from scene to scene or setting to setting. We had Numenor, Lindon, Eregion. We had all these settings that they're switching, gears to different scenes. So did you find that there were any characters that you were rooting for, or was there any settings or villages that you were rooting for, or as far as I guess the never-ending battle or unrest between these races? You had the elves, the dwarves, then you had the people in Numenor, so they're all kind of separate. So was there any sort of people you were rooting for, villages you were rooting for to succeed, any specific characters?
There are, but real quick, and I don't often tip my cap to Amazon, but when I'm watching something on Prime, it's super clutch to pause it and they put the actors and the characters'
Yes.
names up. So
You
you
know
can
what?
actually keep track of that because
You know
there's
what?
only so much you can get by just reading the captions,
I know
the
that's so
subtitles.
funny because sometimes I'd be waiting. I'm like looking
Yeah.
and waiting for them to say the character's
Pause.
name. And
Yeah.
then I know, and then sometimes they would say it, like the character who was speaking, they would have a colon and then their name. So you know what? I didn't even think of pausing it and looking at the name. That would have been an easy way to do it, of course, but I didn't think of that.
I curse out like Netflix, Apple, Paramount all the time when I don't know a character's name and I can't just pause it and find out. There are a couple character arcs that I did find endearing. But to your point with like the different populations
Yeah.
in the films, it's kind of like one human, one elf, one dwarf, one hobbit, one wizard. It's kind of like one of each, and they work together.
Yeah.
And this one, and I don't necessarily know whether it's just because of the whole prequel sense of this, all the different populations are kind of segregated. So we're
Yeah.
kind of seeing a very early civilization phase where these groups all lived independently. They did not mingle with each other. The dwarves live in their mountain, Kazandur or whatever they call it. the elves are almost an extinct population. They're clinging to this castle basically that's their last bit of sand, I guess, on the planet. Um, the humans kind of typical humans, the typical bureaucracies. They don't know their rear end from their elbow as far as picking a leader. I didn't see the hobbits. I'm guessing the halflings were kind of like the hobbits in this, but to your point that the different populations were very kind of operating independent of each other as opposed to what
I
we're
think
used to from the
that's
film.
yeah, that's by design, I think, because if this is, I don't know, like what the time span is, hundreds or thousands of years before Lord of the Rings, what we
Mhm.
know, the timeline of that. But I think that's by design because they're probably trying to show that that's how they got to this collaborative Middle Earth in that
Yeah,
time. So that's why everyone was segregating, kind of came together. So because
collaborative corporate buzzword.
collaborative, yeah, synergy, because of the synergy between people like Elrond, who's an elf, and his friend Durin,
Hmm.
who's a dwarf,
Yeah,
who have each other's backs, like characters that knew each other. That's kind of what started this whole collaborative environment.
yeah. So I mean, character wise, this was the one I kind of felt like the most empathy for lack of a better word, is one that's operating on the side almost the whole time, and is with Isildur because it feels like he has some kind of ascension, some kind of hierarchy to
Mm,
be a leader in this story arc, but he's kind of like off on his own side quest. Uh, and that ties to the kind of human part, the kind of human population of this, the Queen Muriel arc, where overall I kind of didn't find a whole lot of attachment to.
I didn't either.
I see this power struggle. They can't pick their leader. There's a hierarchy, question mark. You got half of them that are committed to her, half of them committed to that other guy. Um, and it felt weird because you've got a war going on with
Mm,
the orcs and the elves. You've got this mystery Sauron thing, which not everyone seems to be aware of, but the humans definitely aren't aware of it. They don't even
yeah.
know who Sauron is, it seems like. So you've got this like massive battle and wars going on. The humans are too busy having, for lack of a better word, an election of sorts, trying to figure out trying to figure their mess out.
Yeah,
But
I didn't.
I felt bad for Isildur just because like I like this character, I like this arc, but it's like it just felt like it was operating on the side the whole time.
Yeah, I think I kind of liked his arc until he met that chick, Estrid. Was that her name?
Mm,
And then
probably.
by the end, that was just kind of like meh to me.
Yeah.
How she was like, it wasn't, didn't her fiance come home? It was her fiance. And then she's like basically realizing that, they had to say a prayer or something when they're building their house or when
Hmm.
they're moving into their house. And she just basically is like telling Isildur that she's not feeling it. And
Hmm.
and then like they kiss and it's just like, oh, okay, so now like they're together. She just leaves her fiance that she was like so happy he came back. It just like, I don't know if I liked the drama or where that was going. I did like the camaraderie, I guess you would say, between Isildur and Theo and um Arendir.
Yeah, the little band, like kind of little band of brothers chemistry almost.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked that chemistry. But yeah, I found the Numenor arc to not be very compelling at all. The only person I felt sympathy for was Elendil, who's like the captain, the queen's right-hand man. Didn't really
Yeah.
feel much sympathy for like the queen being the rightful queen, and I don't find myself liking her. I don't find myself rooting for her. And to me, the more compelling or more sweet storylines were like The Stranger. And I found Tom Bombadil, that weirdo. I found I found that whole thing. There were some exchanges between Tom Bombadil and the stranger that I was just like, this is hilarious. Like, why can't we have a sitcom where these two guys live together? Because that would be hilarious.
Yeah, it's like the Odd Couple from back in the 70s.
Yeah, like the Odd Couple. And it's you're rooting for him to like learn this magic from Tom Bombadil. You're rooting for him to figure out who he is. It's very sweet where he's, separated from Nori and Poppy, and he misses them. Like he genuinely misses them as traveling companions, and he wants to get back to them. And I liked that whole story arc. I really like the arc of Durin as well. The fact that he's just trying to live his life with his wife and his family, and he can see that the ring is changing his father negatively, and he's trying to remove his father or remove the ring from his father, and it just, his father ends up throwing him across the room basically when he tries, and he just feels like it's a losing battle. And then you have that, I think it was right at the beginning of that first 5 minutes of the finale where he loses his father. His father basically like sacrifices himself, but he basically takes the ring off, sacrifices himself, and says, "You are King Durin. You are the king now."
Durin, I did find Durin's arc to be enduring because I had, I guess this is the sympathy as opposed to the empathy. I did have a little bit of sympathy for Durin because I found him to be someone that is always constantly looking for his father, the king's approval. But at the same time, that was kind of a developing part of his character as opposed to earlier where he's kind of like a rebel and he kind of just wants to do his own thing. Like he doesn't necessarily want any part of his ascension to the throne. He's just kind of like, well, I know I'm going to be the king, but I don't really care about that. He's kind of doing his own thing with his wife. And then that kind of comes back into frame as he's constantly seeking his father's approval. So I had a kind of a sympathy for him in that, which only, to your point, only gets more and more difficult as the king's kind of corruption from the ring progresses.
Yeah, and I felt too like Durin was, which resonates with me. He's kind of a truth seeker. He's like, okay, this doesn't seem right to me. And he's kind of the one who's asking questions. And he's like, wait, Dad, I don't like what this is doing to you. And he's the one who's, sees that things are not right, seemingly, tries to look into it or help the situation, and then really continues to persevere even though he's met with obstacles. So, I mean, how can you not love a guy who just kind of bounces back and keeps on trucking when things get difficult.
And he's a good guy. I mean, Elrond comes for help, and Elrond at this point has been missing for, months and months probably. He comes to ask for his aid, and Durin's like, yeah, absolutely. You're my bro. Of course I'll help you. And then he winds up being conflicted with his father's kind of maddening sense, and you kind of get the feeling like he has regret now that he can't get out to Elrond, which of course he does, but way after the fact. Fortunately, Elrond's still alive, but,
right?
Way after the fact.
Yeah, and getting to, speaking of Elrond, I it's funny because Elrond and Galadriel have this thing, but to me, it's like Galadriel looks a lot older. Like Elrond is like this man child with like crazy cheekbones. Like, how is this guy human?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how is this actor human with cheekbones like that? But Oh my
I
God,
actually thought it was the other way around. I thought Elrond felt like the one that was older and Galadriel felt like the one that
really?
was younger. Yeah.
Oh my God. You know what it brings me back to? It brings me back to one of the sisters in Wheel of Time. Remember that lady with the insane cheekbones? Like, that's what I feel like Elrond's cheekbones are like. Like, it's not a normal human face
Yeah,
structure.
yeah, yeah. Oh shoot. Oh yes, yes, yes. The one that was she was playing both sides. I can't remember her name. But
Yeah.
she was kind of like playing all sides of the sandbox.
Yeah. Her cheekbones are
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
popping. And
Yeah,
his were
that's
the
right.
same. When he was like a side profile, his cheeks are like out here.
Yeah.
I
He
just
had like
could
a
not
he had a super jaw.
I could not get over it. But I did, that being said, like I know he was kind of pushing back on her because he didn't believe in the rings. He didn't think that they were going to do something good, and she just really believed in it. And I think I generally have had sympathy for and kind of rooted for Galadriel, but I don't know.
Eh,
I just don't like they refer to her as like commander, and she's like so important, like warrior wise, but like to me she's just not really a serious warrior.
I think she's a commander for lack of options because the elven race is kind of disappearing at this point. Uh, so it's like, okay, you're a pretty skilled fighter, so we'll put you in charge of a offensive of some kind because we just don't have a lot of options.
Yeah, but then also to have when the High King comes and they come into Eregion and they're fighting, uh Elrond was literally at the head of the pack. Like he was, so you have this man child leading the elf race in battle. Like I just didn't know if he was up to it. I mean, yes, he was swinging a sword and taking out orcs and stuff, but I was just like this guy
Well,
is the most powerful guy you have.
that's normal because the High King, I mean, we see him step up and join the battle at the end.
Right.
But I mean, normally you wouldn't put your top leader on the front line because if the top leader goes down, then you're like, oh shoot, who are we taking
Yeah,
command from now?
I mean, that made sense to me, but like the High King, like I believe he's a good fighter. I don't know, just from his stature. Like Elrond's this little guy. I don't
He
know. I
carried
just
himself, yeah.
kind of a lanky guy. Like I just don't know if I see him as being like this force to be reckoned with. And same for Galadriel, but I did kind of decide like by the end, like when they have that moment, I'm like, you know what? I kind of like I like them together, kind of.
They were typical elves to me. The elves are, there's no internet's gonna get mad at me for this one. There's no fat elves, you know.
They are very
So
tall and slender, right? But that's
yeah,
that's like kind of their body type. Like that's just
right. That's yeah, exactly. Yeah, and with their relationship, I I don't know. I didn't necessarily have like warm and squishy feelings when they had their little moment at the end because I had kind of written off their story as a romantic arc because to me they just came off like they were childhood friends,
yeah.
like platonic friends for 20, 30 years or whatever it is. So that like when that happened, it kind of didn't. It kind of was like, wait, they're doing this now? They have feelings for each other? Like this could have been established like even in season one. And so it's like it just and then now it's a thing. So I kind of like that kind of threw me off a little bit, especially because he's basically saying goodbye because he's effectively sacrificing her. Of course, she escapes, but he's effectively sacrificing her because Adar said, if you don't give me the ring, she's done. I'm gonna put her head on a pike and
Mm.
ride it into battle with me.
Yeah. I mean, it was I think maybe to your point, the first season was a lot of exposition and background. So yeah, we did I definitely did get the sense too that they were like childhood friends, that they've known each other a long time. Maybe it was like after what they had been through with everything, that's when they kind of realized like, oh, maybe we have feelings that are more than friends. I mean, that's what I only can assume is like after the big battle and after all of that, like she thought that she was not gonna live. I mean, they were like healing her. She was like knocking on death's door. So
Oh yeah. I, I wasn't. The healing part kind of almost felt a little unbelievable to me because it's like she just got waxed by Sauron.
yeah, she was very close to dead, and I was like, I don't think they would kill her off, but who
I
knows?
don't. I don't hate when a story kills off a beloved character. Like you have to feel like that's how TV shows get you emotionally involved when you feel connected to a character and then gone next episode. Like that. Like we've made a couple connections to Game of Thrones. I mean, that's why a lot of the characters in Game of Thrones are beloved because you got connected to one. 3 episodes later, they're dead.
Right. But also too, when you're watching a prequel series like this, when you meet younger versions of characters that you know, so like Elrond is in Lord of the Rings, and so is Galadriel, right? Isn't Galadriel played by Kate Blanchett?
This is where I'm going to plead ignorance to being so many years since seeing the films.
Yeah, so that's what I think is I didn't really make that connection because I don't really think that the actor who plays Elrond looks anything like the actor who plays older Elrond. But
No cheekbone.
yes, so I believe Elrond and Galadriel are like together. I don't remember what the actor's name is who plays the older guy, but so I was like, okay, they can't kill her off because she's in the future unless she dies or something and they miraculously heal her and bring her back, so
Yeah.
that was kind of in the corner of my mind, like, are they going to revive her with the rings or with something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, which I get that since you remember that, it would make sense to me now. It's still a little unbelievable to me, but we are operating in a land of magic and fantasy here, so it's not like it's completely out of the realm of possibility. I just like I said, I don't like I said I don't not to repeat myself. I just don't think it's a bad thing when you have a beloved character die. Obviously, they can't do that if she's in the future,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, don't at us because you're just like, what? You didn't understand that was younger Galadriel and Elrond? Like, don't at us, please.
sorry, I'm getting older. It's been probably 15 years since I
I
watched the
know, honestly. Yeah. So speaking of people getting mad, so we're in fact, we are both from Connecticut. So there used to be, I don't know if it's still operating now. There used to be this urban radio station in Connecticut that used to have a segment where people would call in and rant. And the DJ would say, "Tell them why you mad." And that's what the setup was, and then people would call in. So tell them why you mad. And what I mean by that is, was there anything that irked you, that you found woke, that you just kind of rolled your eyes at? Anything that was unbelievable? Anything that fits in that category?
Yeah, but while I was watching it, it didn't dawn on me because I'm just kind of generally consuming the show and trying to note things down for our production. But a few days ago, I noticed you retweeted or re-X'd, whatever the correct word nowadays is, this article from the Babylon Bee, which is obviously satirical,
Right.
but about how much money they spent on this series and just to have a dopey sword fight with Galadriel, which at the time I'm watching, I'm just kind of like enjoying the choreography of it and whatnot. But then and it doesn't necessarily, and the joke they're making is the fact that it's a woman having this badass sword fight, but like that didn't necessarily click on me either because I'm used to Game of Thrones. Arya was a very skilled sword fighter, but the difference between those two moments is Arya is learning to be a very skilled sword fighter with a rapier. Needle is a very lightweight, easily maneuverable sword, and Galadriel's out here with a broadsword, and not just one broadsword, but two broadswords. Now, anyone that knows anything about medieval history, a broadsword is a very, very heavy weapon. So whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, that takes a lot of strength to lift one of them. So to be whipping yourself around in this very choreographed fight scene with two broadswords is a bit unbelievable.
Was that at the end? Because I believe when I
Somewhere in the
saw that.
middle, like early middle.
Okay, yeah. So it must have been when I was thinking of that moment, I was thinking of like there was like a little bit of a sword thing in episode 4. And I actually like
About right.
It's not that I don't believe that women can't wield swords or women can't be skilled fighters or anything like that. Like to me, it just like I I don't know if it was the actress just not being believable in the fight sequence to me. Like it just like you were supposed to think like, oh wow, she's such a crazy fighter. And I was just like, I just didn't see that. Like it was just kind of lackluster to me.
That may have been a little bit by design because the scene was set up like here, young warriors come challenge me, and she's kind of toying with them a little bit.
Mm.
So that the believability factor of like deftness with the swords, for lack of a better word, it, that may have been a little bit by design because she's kind of teasing them a little bit in the fights. Like you're
Yeah.
not gonna like okay, you think you could beat me because I'm this little elf girl, and you're I'm gonna run circles around you. So she's kind of playing with them a little bit. That may have been a little bit by design.
Maybe. I
If I
mean,
had to make a guess.
I mean, I found that part when she's going through like I think she's going through a Regian and she's got like literally a group of like 10 women behind her and she's like defending them, and they're all like,
Hmm.
creeping around behind her. Like I found that
Oh, the
like
escape. Yeah, the
a
escape.
smit
Yep.
I found that a little bit more believable with her skills in
Hmm.
that scene, but yeah, episode 4 I was just kind of like this is just not coming across as convincing to me that she's like some badass with the sword, like just not seeing it, sorry.
Well, and you said we've already went over it. You didn't buy her as this big strong leader commander. So
Yeah.
I guess in your eyes, you look at her character to be more of like an espionage type of militant as opposed to front lines type of militant.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Also a couple moments that I thought were like kind of lame. So at the it might have been the second to last episode, all of a sudden Poppy is just like making out with this Merrimack guy. It just seemed kind of sudden. I'm just like, okay, like we're
It
just
wasn't a warm-hearted moment for you.
I don't know. It just seemed kind of out of left field. Like yes, they were living in that. I forget what the name of that community is. But I just
What's dwelling place?
yeah, it kind of seemed out of left field a little bit. And so I was just kind of like, really? Like they're kissing, making out already? They hardly
Well, the
know each
fact that
other.
like they did that and then they left it. Like they never returned to that. So it was just like, oh,
Yes.
we were on this trek together and we fell in love, and then you never like the only time y'all saw them together was at the end when they're all leaving and they're just standing next to each other. There doesn't look like there's any passion between them at all. Like he doesn't have his arm around her. You know what I
Yes. And you kind of get the sense they're never going to see each other ever again. And
mean?
like
Yeah,
they're probably fine with that. And then the only
fleeting
other
romance.
And then the only other eye roll I had was so Durin's father gets upset when he tries to take the ring. He pitches him across the room. And then Disa's like, okay, we have to stop them from digging. Like, we're gonna shut down this digging thing. So she goes down to the
Yes,
mines or
yeah, yeah.
whatever. And then she does this weird, like this weird singing thing
Oh,
and to like summon I think they're bats or there's some sort of flying creature, and like she brings in the bats to like scare the crew, so like all the little
yeah.
dwarves are just like oh, and they like just go away. And then and then Durin is there and he says, obviously in his like crazy heavy, like his is like a Scottish accent, and he's like, I love you, and like his Scottish accent. And I was just like, eye roll. I was just like, this is so corny as hell. Who wrote this script? George
And
Lucas?
yeah, well, or the people George Lucas handed Star Wars off to,
Mm.
the people at Disney. So that one, like, refresh my memory if this is another thing lost in the years since seeing the films. I don't remember that being a dwarf ability. That this like resonating vocal singing ability to kind of like control animals or move rocks or whatever. Like I don't
But
remember that being a
also,
thing.
I'm trying to remember from the first season, it might have something to do with her, his wife specifically, because she has those like weird glowing eyes, like
Yeah.
orange eyes. So it might be something about where she comes from or what her powers are. But yeah, it was just like
Oh, okay.
this weird, like, like I
Yeah.
can't even.
So maybe she's like a half dwarf. This is a magic ability from whatever other
Yes,
population she's from.
right.
I could buy that. I could buy that. I could buy that. It does as if that's the reason I could buy that.
Yeah, it just seemed laughable to me. It was just ridiculous.
And
Okay,
that might also do better to sell the diversity for diversity's sake.
potentially might be onto something with that. So yeah, now that we're towards the end, we can talk about the big spoilers of the second season. So two things that really got my attention. I was like, oh damn.
Oh
Um,
damn.
oh damn. Like all of a sudden, like I was like, okay, now I'm
Mhm.
interested. So the
Yeah.
first thing was and this was like this was like this was kind of heartbreaking to me. So that was Adar wanting to achieve peace with Galadriel. They
Yeah.
had kind of a plan, and he's looking pretty good. Like I think he used the ring to heal himself or something.
Uh,
I don't remember what the explanation of that was. He looked a little bit like, you know how he's just like kind of like looks like his face is dry, like and like
thought Adar was
cracked.
dead. I think Adar was dead.
Yeah, he looked like a little bit healthier. And I think she made a
Mhm.
comment about him, like, oh, like you're looking, and I forget what he
Oh,
said.
oh, 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 I know. Yeah, I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? And then so like they're in a good place and they're like they have this plan, they want to achieve peace and he's like I just want, I'll just take my and he's very lovingly calling the orcs. I just want to take my children to Mordor. They'll never disturb
Hmm.
Middle Earth. Like you guys can live in peace.
Hmm.
And then and then they bring in this orc on a stretcher, basically,
Yeah.
a medieval stretcher, and the
The
orc
evil.
is wounded, and he's kind of leading over, like, oh no, I'm gonna, there's it's never too late. Like I'm gonna fix this. Like basically, this orc is like dying, and he's like freaking out thinking that another one of his children is going to die. And then the orc freaking reaches up and stabs him. And I'm just like, no.
I
Like,
know.
I'm just starting to like Adar. I'm just starting to like the alliance little thing that he's got built up with Galadriel. Like everyone's going to be happy with peace, and then that happens, and then to make it worse, they just every single one of those damn orcs stabs him, and they just like mass slaughter him, and then uh, it just
And and it makes it worse because we haven't talked much about Sauron, but it made it worse because it was kind of the obviously cherry on top doesn't seem like the right connotation here, but it was like the confirmation of Sauron's manipulation because he has been manipulating Celebrimbor this entire time.
yep.
And then at the end, the orcs are loyalists to Adar, and he manipulates the orcs to realize like he's leading you to death. Come serve me,
Mm-hmm.
which is the kind of slap in the face because Adar's whole thing was he wanted to make sure his orcs were not going to be enslaved by Sauron. So that like it was kind of that confirmation moment of this guy is so evil and twisted and turning everyone that should be allied with each other against one another. Um, and I did what like I, I did move this down because the Adar arc to your point, I completely agree. That was one of the endearing character arcs of mine.
Mm.
Um, but with the spoiler aspect, we didn't want to speak of it too soon. Um, but that one, because I had the same thing. Like I should not like Adar. This is a bad guy. He's just
Right.
leading these bloodthirsty orcs against elves, and for him to kind of have this redemption back around that like instantly got me back into rooting for him, and then the Sauron thing with the orcs betraying him was just like, oh, crushing.
Yeah, that one hurt. And, especially even after Galadriel was like, don't attack Eregion because that's what Sauron wants you to do. Like,
Right.
don't play into what he wants you to do. And he did. And he ended up dying for it. And, like, that just sucks. I
Yes.
mean, that just
Was
really
like
sucked. So,
was like
yeah.
a thick and twisted shell game.
Yeah. So that was the first kind of bombshell of the season or of the finale. And then at like the very end, we find out that the stranger has a name. He's found his staff, or his staff has found him rather, and his name is Gandalf.
Yeah. I know.
Like, but why
And he
did I
doesn't
not think of this?
they
Why?
they cast because they cast someone that doesn't look like Ian McKellen.
True, true.
And this was another arc that I found endearing with the stranger, because even going back to season one, it was one of those things that actually kind of kept me in season one, like kind
Mm,
of watching, like this guy is almost aloof. He's out wandering in the desert. He has no idea what he is. Everyone around him seems to know, or at least hypothesize what he is. Like they think he's a wizard. They know he's a wizard, whatever. But he's just kind of like almost empty head with what he is or what his abilities might be. So to like kind of see him find himself and uh sorry, what was his name? Bilbo or whatever it is?
um,
Tom something.
Tom Bombadil.
Bombadil, yeah. So like that relationship with him, and then his relationship and eventual rejection of the Dark Wizard, like
Mm-hmm.
that, all those pieces kind of come together, and it's all like the puzzles building. Like, okay, no, this guy is a wizard. He does have these abilities, and you get engaged in him finding whatever pathway to realize all of that. And then of course they just draw like, what's your name, and Gandalf, and they had like mind blown. I'm like, oh my god, it's freaking Gandalf.
Yeah, it's like maybe they cast somebody who didn't look like Ian McKellen specifically because they didn't want people to like I don't know
Hmm.
why I didn't consider that before. Like I should have been like, oh, that guy is definitely Gandalf. I don't know if that's just because we're not like fans, like we're I guess fans, people who are genuine diehard Lord of the Rings
Yeah,
fans, like please let us know in the comments
if it's in
of
the
this
books,
video.
if
Please let us
Tolkien
know.
implied this, yeah,
Were you just like, oh my God, this stranger is definitely Gandalf from the beginning? Or am I
yeah.
just stupid?
And they're
Please
and
let
they're
me know.
just they're waiting for the payoff as opposed to us, the payoff
Not
hitting us.
knowing.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, maybe we're just like blissfully ignorant or something, and we just had no idea. And like everybody else is like, that's Gandalf. And we just didn't
yeah,
get it.
yeah. That was and like that they it kept it, and you know what it also could have been. It also just could have been a byproduct of not knowing the timeline.
Right.
We don't know how many years in the past this was. So, obviously Gandalf is already an old man in the film, so you, you kind of you kind of lose a little bit of sense of time in, like, okay, are the where with House of the Dragon, it's so many
Mhm.
years before Game of Thrones, so it's like we're watching these characters now. Are these the same characters? Or are they the direct like parentage of the characters we're used to, or they're like three or four generations in between? So like that, it's kind of like falling victim to that timeline in a sense where we don't know if the characters we're watching, outside of our my Galadriel brain fart. Um, uh, we don't know if the characters we're watching are the characters that we've already seen.
Yeah. And I think it's just a little different because most of the characters in this show are not human. So we can assume, and we kind of know, I guess, that these are elves and dwarves, and they don't have a human lifespan. Like, you could have a
Yeah,
dwarf who's the same as like vampires or
400
shit
years
like
old,
that.
like
Yeah, you
Yoda.
can. Right, like you could be 500 years old and be an elf, and I think that's what it is like, young Elrond and young Galadriel and young Gandalf. They're probably already like of a human age, but they're just going to keep getting older and older in the timeline that we know of, where they're like, say, 700 years old for all we know.
Yeah, they hit the human 85 and they just stay that way for an extra 300 years.
Yeah.
And you know what, Tolkien heads, if you want to troll us in the comments, please be kind.
Yeah.
Leave the bad words on the sideline.
We don't know what
Keep
we're
it,
talking
keep it
about.
professional. Act like it's in there.
Yeah. So I hope this isn't something that makes more Tolkien heads upset, but did you think that season 2 is better than season 1? And do you think that you would watch a season 3 and enjoy it?
Yes, and absolutely, because of what we just spoke of.
Mm.
The Sauron, we're still watching Sauron's growth to power.
Yep.
Which is very intriguing to me. And now we're kind of like thinning out the herd of everyone else versus the mess of story that season 1 was. So
Mhm.
we're kind of thinning that out a little bit, and we can focus more on Sauron now. So there's still that whole rise that we've got to get through, and this Gandalf bomb drop at the end. That's another aspect of looking forward to the next season that that makes me engaged as well, because now the dots are connecting towards
Yeah.
everyone else. Okay, so at some point we're gonna see some kind of a Gimli thing, and at some point Legolas, and at some point
Mm.
Aragon. Of course, he's a human, so maybe that'll be a little bit later. But like maybe the characters that we know from the films are going to start to the track's going to start to be laid for them. If they don't appear on their own, we'll start to see like the breadcrumbs appearing.
Yeah, and I think, early on, I think when I was in the first 2 episodes of this season, I think I was already kind of like, what, I think season 2 is already better than season 1. But that being said, I had written down before I saw the finale that, like it still just wasn't, it's the show still didn't really grab me. But with that moment with Adar, and the moment with finding out who the stranger is, that he's Gandalf, that made me a little bit more look forward to, okay, if and when there's a season 3, like I kind of want to know like what happens with young Gandalf. I kind of want to know how that arc continues. But yeah, I just hope it keeps getting better. Hopefully season 1 was just there for expositional purposes, to provide background information, to lay the groundwork. Now let's get into the interesting stuff, hopefully.
Yeah. And that pullback from the last scene with Gandalf, it's very obvious they're in the Shire.
Yes.
So now the hobbits, then now maybe we'll start to see the hobbits at some point come through. So and just going back to what I said at the top of the show, just the general flow of a story. It's not just ink blot writing and granular information. Like you said, we're actually getting into the meat of this. We actually have a storyline to follow now. It's not just this, and this, and it all happens at the same time. Good luck figuring it out.
Yeah. Well, if you enjoy listening to this show, we would appreciate it if you gave us 5 stars. If you left us some love, please leave us some nice things in the comments, Tolkien heads. Don't hate us. And also make sure you follow along with us on Instagram and TikTok. He is Nutmeg to the number, Palmetto like the disgusting bug. I am Binge the Ginge with dots between the words for Instagram, all run together for TikTok. Give us both follows on social, and stay tuned to the show on all of our platforms: YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and episode 4 coming up. Really exciting. So we're going to be visiting North Carolina. Well, not literally, but figuratively, to hang out with our buddies, the Pogues. And that's for Outer Banks, which is season 4, part 1. And that's on Netflix. And we've personally loved this show ever since it came out in 2020, 4 years ago. So now we'll be discussing it with you guys, not just in our DMs about what went on the first 3 seasons. So we're pretty excited about that.
So excited.
So make sure you catch up with Outer Banks and tune in for our discussion next time. Until the next real review, Red and Red signing out.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world.
Don't act so surprised, Your Highness.
Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
What? Do what?
No. Try not. Do. Or do not.
Because I don't want no scrubs.
Let the dogs out, like, who let the dogs out? Who?
Who brought this guy along?
I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
One more thing. Do me a favor. Don't go chasing waterfalls.
Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'll take care, all right? None but love for you. None but love for you.
Have any clue what's about to happen to him?
Oh, not a chance in hell. Good night.
Blow up! Peace!
Smile, you son of a...
You did it. You crazy son of a bitch, you did it.
Hey,
Not funny anymore. Chelsea references.
Still, nothing. I swear to you.
But as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night, we will not vanish without a fight, we're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.